We're going
Checking
live.
connection.
Cool.
And we're live.
That's gonna be the first thing that comes up on the stream.
This says, oh, there it goes. Cool. Oh,
There
that's
it is.
hard. We're like looking at ourselves.
It's so fun watching us in the past.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep this open here for the chat.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, some people are already here. Welcome. Hello from Mill City Roasters.
In snowy Minnesota.
From snowy Minneapolis. If you're just logging on, my name's Lauren.
I am Bryant.
We are two of the education team here at Mill City. We host roasting classes, do videos, do consultations, all kinds of roaster training.
All sorts.
We also roast and answer phones.
Yeah. Wow. We were actually just roasting before this.
You were roasting before this.
That's true.
What were you roasting today?
We got a good mix of stuff. We
Yeah.
got some, what is it? All over. We got some Central, some South. We're in Mexico or in Colombia.
Doing some blends.
Doing some blends.
Cool.
Our favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good 100 pounds this morning.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just an easy 100 pounds before a live YouTube video. No big deal. We're back for our second live cupping of our Roasters Brew Box. If you joined us in October, or if you watched the video on our channel before that we did on the previous stream, we are going to cup these coffees together that you may have at home, you may have tasted on your own before. And this is just an opportunity for us as an industry, as roasters and coffee enthusiasts, to calibrate and kind of hear each other's tasting notes and sort of share some feedback. And we'll also kind of be sharing some insights about this coffee, about the brew box, and about our approach to cupping. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Whether you're on Instagram or YouTube, we're happy to have you here. Hello, Santa Claus.
I love
Pleasure. It looks like the North Pole outside. It is extremely snowy. I think we've got maybe 2 inches since we woke up this morning.
Yeah, I think we're going on 3.
Yeah, probably another 2 or 3 left to go. So if you are somewhere sunny and beautiful, you can enjoy the late November weather vicariously through us. So before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about what the Roasters Brew Box is, what the purpose of it is for us as a product.
Yeah.
We teach in our roasting classes some really core competencies or skills for roasters. And the number one thing we teach is machine control. And the second thing that we teach and that we emphasize all the time is sensory skills.
Always.
The ability to taste coffee and evaluate it and know what's working, what's not working, what's high quality, what's low quality, both from a green coffee perspective and a roast quality perspective, is invaluable. There's really no way to improve your roasting skills if you're not improving your cupping skills.
Right, because you can't hit a target, you can't taste.
You can't hit a target, you can't taste. Steve gets $1 every time we say that.
Yeah, I think so. Shirt's coming soon.
Yeah. So Bryant and I have both been cupping for a long time. Do you remember what the first time you cupped coffee?
Oh, I think it was maybe almost a decade ago now.
Probably me too. Yeah.
It was I remember it was with when I was working at Caribou.
Cool.
Yeah, just at their headquarters here in Minneapolis.
Mine was also at like a big facility. It was I was working for a coffee shop that was owned by CBI in Oregon, Coffee Bean International, and they had us out to the cupping lab and taught us this what feels kind of like a weird way to drink coffee, right?
Yeah.
A very like methodical, very like formulaic way to approach coffee. And it's really intimidating. It can feel really overwhelming.
So overwhelming.
You can't help but feel like you're doing it totally wrong. And then you're maybe at a table where people are saying a lot of words and descriptors, and you're going, I'm not tasting any of this.
That's hard.
It's really hard. Yeah. I always, try to remind students that the primary note on this table and on all tables is coffee, right? We're all tasting coffee first and foremost. And what we're looking for underneath that note is secondary and tertiary flavors that sort of provides nuance.
Totally.
So the purpose of the Brew Box, as I said before, is to give us all a sensory training tool that we can use in our homes. We can cup with other people, and we can kind of share our cupping notes, or like you're doing here, you can cup with us, or you can look at the tasting notes that we provide in the Brew Box and compare your own cupping notes to what we've provided. Right. This is how we both got better at cupping, was cupping with other people and comparing notes.
Yeah, I remember always just kind of like tasting coffee and always trying to hunt for the notes that were on the bag so that I could like identify like, oh, this is what they're calling peach.
Yeah.
Or this is what they're calling citric or lemon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you take a note like that, like peach, and you're like, oh, I was tasting melon.
Yeah.
You know, you can kind of say, okay, next time I taste that melon note, I'm going to call that peach.
Yeah.
That's calibration, right? It's just sort of learning a common vocabulary that we can, you know, all kind of wrap our arms around and say, this is what we all, you know, use this word for.
Right.
So that then when Bryant and I go to customers, we say, this coffee tastes like a peach. And it's something that we both believe in. We don't feel like we're being disingenuous.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, good luck finding that in this cup of coffee.
Only Lauren tasted it, and Bryant doesn't believe it. So let's talk a little bit about this coffee. So this is Colombia. The coffee group, the shareholder group is called Manos Juntas.
So cool.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about this coffee, about the processing of it?
Yeah, the process, I mean, it's just straight up natural process. But the unique thing about the Manos Juntas kind of, I guess, mill and kind of how they operate is, you know, they take a lot of risk of the processing out from the producers.
Yeah.
So product is delivered and, you know, a lot of times producers can't take that risk to go through experimenting with natural process or anaerobic processes.
Yeah.
But the mill can. So as an entity that can kind of like give them that financial freedom of just like, all right, here's money for your coffee and we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
It kind of makes it a really cool and unique project that I think more and more mills and cooperatives are starting to go off of these days. So it's exciting to see the quality that's come through with these processes.
And this anaerobic natural process specifically takes these coffees. They're all kind of brought in, like Bryant said, from 8 shareholders to the mill, and they're tested using a Brix meter, which measures sugar content. And then they're naturally processed in an anaerobic, state with nitrogen flushing and very, very controlled, very low temperature fermentation. And what you get is some really wild kind of fruit forward flavors. So, you know, experimental processing is something that in our industry is becoming more and more popular, more sought after. We're seeing coffees at much higher price points, utilizing these kind of new or experimental or sort of cutting edge fermentation processes. And it's because people are kind of constantly looking for new, exciting flavors to share with their customers or to bring to competition or to win awards.
Yeah. Well, and even the drop ship offerings from Forest Coffee that we offer. They just started pitching fruit into their fermentations.
Oh yeah, like adding fruit during fermentation.
So they're experimenting with that and kind of incorporating a lot of that like wine and beer process.
This coffee does something similar where they're adding yeast during the fermentation. And so they're trying to kind of activate that fermentation and just do interesting things, that coffee might not naturally do if it was left to its own devices, or if we were using more traditional kind of more like well-worn processing methods. So it's a very exciting coffee to taste for all of these reasons. It's also just like a really beautiful, high quality, high elevation, really nice varietals go into these estates. And so it's just a really lovely coffee to taste. We're going to get into our first pass, but before we do, I just want to talk about what's different with these 4 coffees. We always wanted to include a reference point, and that's what the sample roast is. So this is a sample roast, obviously roasted by Bryant, and this is exactly how we would have tasted this coffee the first time we saw it or the first time we got to know it. So it's a roast that has very, very little inputs or like almost no variables are changed during the roast. Coffee goes into the roaster, it gets brown enough to drink, and then we take it out. And this is our first impression. So what we're going to taste, it's not the smartest idea to go in with expectations of how coffee is going to taste, but what we would probably expect to taste here with the sample roast is coffee that tastes a little fast, a little green, right? Maybe a little bit vegetal because it's a very fast roast. But it's going to give us that first impression, and it's going to show you, if you're tasting along with us, sort of why we bought these coffees.
For sure.
And then, Bryant, you want to tell us what Profile 1 seeks to do? Oh, it's not on that page.
Yeah,
it's on this page.
Yeah, Profile 1 is going to be your kind of tried and true approach to roasting naturals. Low and slow. A little bit longer of a roast, still shorter development phase after first crack, about 14-15%.
Kind of the longest of the three, right? It's like the one that goes all the way to the end here.
All the way to the end, to 400 degrees in just shy of 12.5 minutes.
Cool.
So kind of like really approaching it slowly so that we're not like burning off the sugars is kind of what we all think about going fast with a natural. So we really took this slower just to round out the flavors, make it really sweet, approachable, and kind of tone down a little bit of acidity that might be there.
So we call it like classic expression, big, boozy, fruity, right? If you bought a natural because you want like Hawaiian fruit punch, that's what we're doing with coffee number 1. Coffee number 2 is the other side of the coin. This is, you bought a natural because it was available, but what you actually wanted was something crisp, clean, high acid, and really refreshing. So this is kind of an iteration of roasting a natural and sort of pretending it's a washed coffee, or sort of making it taste a little bit more refined. With this, Bryant took the profile quite a bit faster, but then also took it a little bit hotter. So we're eliminating some of that boozy fruitiness, and instead we're sort of like emphasizing some of that citrus acidity and that really like light body and almost kind of tannic mouthfeel. This is, I call it like a natural for like acid heads or people who like a lot of, washed Ethiopias, high elevation, like African coffees that are really clean and have like a lot of, sort of clarity in the cup.
Yeah, just in your face.
Yes. Boom. So, it's cool to compare these two cups too, because it shows you that you could buy one green coffee and then do a few different things with it for your menu. So you could actually have it on drip or on the espresso bar in a couple different iterations. So you're sort of maximizing the potential of your inventory.
Yeah, definitely.
And then number 3 is our Goldilocks coffee.
3's the Goldilocks. 3's kind of that like middle ground where it's like not hot and fast, not low and slow, but kind of a middle approach. And it's kind of the approach that, we like to approach our naturals here at Mill City. So not so fast that we're getting that like really punchy kind of like in your face kind of acidity, but not so low that you're only getting kind of like round, deep sweetness. We kind of want a hybrid of the two. And so it's a little bit in the middle of the temperatures, and it's also in the middle of time. But all these coffees are in that 14 to 15% in development.
Which is kind of what we teach, is like sort of a guiding, maybe best practice when you're roasting a natural. In class, we certainly try to get students to sort of stay within that like 15 to like maybe 21 or 22% window.
Right.
Because if you go too far beyond that, of course, you're kind of getting into that roast flavor, and you're not really anymore. You're not really tasting that really high quality processing, or that all of the work that went into it to make this coffee nice and fruity. So I see that some people are ready to cup. I see that some people have lost their sense of taste and smell, and for that, I'm very sorry. I hope you take good notes during this cupping, and when you're back in action, back in fighting form, you can cup these coffees along with us. So we're going to go in and do our first pass, which of course is our dry fragrance, and we're going to break all the cupping rules because we're just going to say what we smell as we go instead of taking notes.
Love it.
Yeah. I always think a sample roast to me is like a little bit like fresh cut grass. This one has like a nice like lemongrass quality to it. Very fresh, very vibrant.
Yeah, it really does. That kind of like fresh herbaceousness. But there is a strong like sweet backbone.
Profile 1 for me has got like a lot of tropical fruit, Hawaiian punch, that like red fruit, a little bit of like pineapple.
Yeah, I'm thinking like pink and red Starburst. Like out of like the tropical pack. Yeah.
It's still really high noted, but you can tell that when we get into tasting it, it's going to be very syrupy. Yeah.
And it does have like a little bit of like an overarching milk chocolate to it too, which is really nice.
Number 3.
I can tell why this is hot and fast. And why this is, it's very, it almost reminds me of like a strawberry rhubarb.
I was going to say like grapefruit, which is sort of in that rhubarb category too. It's like really punchy, really vibrant, and it has a nice harmony of acidity and bitterness to kind of carry it. This reminds me of like a really nice cocktail, like a really nice, like clear spirit with like a lot or citrus.
I could get down with like yellow grapefruit, like pomelo.
Where
it has a little bit more of that sweetness, but not as tart and drying as that red grapefruit.
Cool. All right, and on our middle of the road. Wow.
I got like a little bit of like a maraschino cherry.
This is kind of more like purple fruit for me,
Yeah.
you know? So whereas like number one, which is highlighting fruit, is like very tropical. This is kind of more like classic fruits that I would find in my grocery store.
Yeah.
You know?
Accessible fruits.
Accessible fruits here in Minneapolis. Yeah, grape, you know, date, fig, a little bit more like balanced and like well-rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very nice.
All right. Well, that's just the first impression with the dry fragrance. We're going to grab our hot water, release the steam, and we're going to start pouring in 3, 2, 1. If you've watched any of our cupping videos or joined us for cupping in class, I know a lot of you have joined us for classes. You know that we use a really standard ratio for cupping. So we're working with like 7-ounce cups. They hold about 190 milliliters of water. And so we weigh out roughly an 11-gram dose. That gives us right around that 1:18 ratio. If you are using bigger cups, you'll want to increase your coffee amount a little bit to maintain that same ratio. We fill them all the way to the top with nice hot water from our tower that's about 200 degrees. We start a timer counting up because we want to measure total elapsed time for the whole cupping, not just the brew cycle. We're going to let these cups steep for 4 minutes, and then we're going to break the crust.
Right.
And did we say what roast date we have here?
The roast date here is going to be...
Is it from the 22nd when we shipped?
Last
Cool.
Tuesday.
So if anyone is
Monday.
working with coffees that they purchased during our last roast date, which was November 22nd, we have the same coffees as you. So a good amount of rest. What's today, the 29th?
Yep.
I think a perfect amount of rest for a coffee like this. Yeah. You know, a lot more rest than what we would do for a sample roast.
Right.
But I think a nice amount of time for this coffee to kind of open up and look mellow.
And make everything accessible to those brewing methods too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to go in now and do our wet aroma. That sample roast is still like really botanical. Like I'm getting a lot of like gin notes, like juniper, pine.
I was thinking like this lemon shortbread kind of like thing.
Yeah.
But high note.
Very high noted. Yeah. Number 2 is just like a sugar bomb. Thinking about like chewy candies again, like Starburst, but like almost like rolled in sugar.
I was thinking strawberry Pop-Tart or
Yes,
like brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tart.
That is a sugar bomb. Yeah, I really love a Pop-Tart.
It's so good.
Oh, 3 got really quiet for me.
Yeah,
it's kind of muted.
I got kind of like allspice.
Okay.
Like really like warming spices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that like a lot of that citrus has like kind of dipped down.
Right.
And yeah, it's very like, sweet, chocolatey, almost kind of nougaty.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like currant. Purple jam.
Yeah. I have a little bit of orange and still like really nice sweetness, really nice kind of like cocoa kind of throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Need your glasses to smell better?
Well, I take them off because otherwise like they bump in and you
Yeah.
know, put them back on so I don't get a headache.
So we've got a minute left here for the brew. Hello, Michigan. Ooh. And again, Mrs. Claus on a 2K at the North Pole.
Love it.
Love it.
It's a lot of roasting for the holiday.
Really is. That's a lot of stockings to fill. We will sometimes see, this is just sort of an aside about cupping, but we'll sometimes see this crust like break during that brewing time, during that 4 minutes. And for us, we would always make a note of that. If we were taking notes for our cupping, we would always mention like the crust broke or the cup, deflated.
Yeah.
And it could mean a few things. In general, it either means that the coffee was roasted very, very, very light, right? We don't have those nice gases kind of like holding up that raft.
Right.
Or if you're getting roasted coffee, it could mean that that coffee is very stale.
Yeah.
Right? It's very old. I have also seen it with really old greens. Have you encountered that?
I have not had it with really old greens.
Yeah.
I've used it as that kind of visual for, if I'm dialing in a roasted coffee.
Yeah.
And if it does break, I think to myself for my roasting reference, like, oh, maybe I took that a little too light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't name names, but we had classes in November where a couple students did like 8 or 9% of time in development, and those cups just sank.
Really heavy coffee.
Never formed a crust.
Nope.
Yeah. All right, we're going in and we're going to break these cups. So sweet.
Mm.
Wow, really slightly different, impressions.
Yeah.
Bryant knows this about me, but I never take notes on the break. For some roasters or some cuppers, they get a lot of information on the break, and it's a really useful moment in the cupping. For me, it's not.
I used to always take notes on just the break.
Have I been a really bad influence on you?
And never smell the crust.
Really?
Yeah, I've actually kind of like switched how I cup over time. And yeah, the crust is just what never used to be a key moment for me. It was always the break.
Is that just how you learned?
That's just how I learned over time. Yeah. Yeah, and some importers have also done it that way, and yeah.
I just think it's interesting, it's important to remember that, like, there are rules, and those rules are guidelines.
Yeah.
And even though we talk, a lot about how cupping is this kind of universally standardized metric for evaluation, there are still, there's still variance, and people do it differently. And it's still a very personal ritual, right? Because at the end of the day, we typically cup together, but just together, so as long as we both kind of agree on how we like to do it, then that's kind of all that matters.
Right.
And then I would say that there's a few things that you don't want to do differently, that you don't want to sort of like veer from the path. But yeah, if you're like one of those people who's like, I just don't get a lot of information from this pass or whatever, I would say, give yourself the permission or the freedom to not worry too much about forcing yourself to get that information or to write a note if it's really hard for you to come up with something.
Well, and some coffees too, just stay quiet in the wet or the dry.
Yes,
They're just like, wow, it didn't smell like anything. But then when you put water on it, you're like, whoa, it smells like all the things.
Which is something that, I think all information is still really useful. And so even if I've got a coffee on the table where, like I said earlier, like, oh, this is really muted for me, I would write that word down, because the goal for me with cupping notes is to paint such a detailed picture that I can go back 1 week or 1 month or even 1 year later, and I can look at those notes and I can say, oh, here's what that coffee tasted like, right? That should be, I think that is the ideal of what we're able to do with notes. And so whatever you need to include to sort of leave those breadcrumbs for yourself, even if it's just like a sad face or something that wouldn't make a lot of sense to somebody else.
Stormy weather. Yeah,
you can be like, oh, okay, here's how I was feeling about that coffee on that day.
Yeah, and I a lot need to go back 2 months, because like as we're
we
buying
do
coffee,
too, all the time. Yeah,
because it's like, oh yeah, like we're out of this Ethiopia, but this one tasted incredible 2 months ago. Like that was our backup coffee.
Yeah, we both kind of keep really detailed notebooks. Mine looks similar. It's
dedicated
over there,
notebooks.
And it's always, every time we cup, it's the date, and then I typically will not know which coffees are on the table, so I'll just code them, like, today I would say 1 through 4. But then after we're done and we share our notes, I'll go through and make sure to label what everything was. Again, so if we're thinking about later, like, well, what was that Manos Juntas tasting like on November 29th, I can go back and I have a really clear picture of it.
You can also use the codes on, RoastPath or whatever your cataloging software is. And be like, oh, this was 2321. So that when you note it, you can go back and look up 2321.
And those codes mean nothing to me, but of course you probably are like, oh, that's the roast that went off the rails. So you have a better impression. Any questions from Instagram? Just hollering, just saying hi.
Love it, represented.
All right, we're gonna go in. Our timer's at like 8:45, so kind of the earliest we would want to do our first pass. And we've refreshed our rinse water. We've cleaned our cups. Time to sip.
Sip it and rip it.
Right off the bat, it's like, wow, that tastes like a natural, right? It's boozy. It's kind of like red winey. I get a lot of pineapple. That's the sample roast. You know, pineapple is very high acid. That's kind of like eat the skin off the roof of your mouth, high acidity. And that's kind of what I get here on the sample roast.
Yeah. Yeah. I get kind of like a tart, kind of like cranberry punch holiday kind of like thing.
Yeah. Everything's, like the base is kind of like coming up on that. It feels like I get a lot more flavor in the middle of my palate. Like that's that weight or tactile note that we'll sometimes kind of include in our cupping note. It just feels heavier.
Yeah.
It feels like more weighted and probably more balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it hits kind of like you eat a lot of like cocoa and it's almost like very silky.
Yeah.
But then it hits like in the back. You're just like, oh, there's a little syrupy.
Yeah. Back up to the front of the palate again. It's like very like eye-opening, very like lively. It's like a crisp, green apple that's like really juicy, but really, punchy.
And like a little bit of like wild strawberry or like wild raspberry or like that earthy,
musky.
Yeah.
Kind of sun-kissed.
Yeah.
I think that's raspberries for me more than any other like seasonal fruit tastes like sunshine.
Ooh.
Like in a berry.
Yeah.
Yes. They just really remind me of summer.
Really hoping my raspberry bush produces more this coming summer.
Not today.
Not today, though.
This one, I always think cupping notes tend to hit me like in levels. I'm not a music person, but I would imagine it would be like producing, music where you've got like, treble and bass and all kinds of different things at different levels.
Yeah.
This cup here, this fourth roast, feels like everything is in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
It's like everything, that kind of Dolby sound of like has come. Yeah. And you're like, like I get the acidity, I get the sweet, I get the fruit, but it's really everything's playing at the same level. Which is in competitions what we call taste balance. Yeah.
Yeah. I really get a nice, like pleasant, like licorice, like a little, not like a black licorice, but more of a red licorice. And then like some kind of like sweet fruity spice kind of thing. But yeah, swooping mids.
Yeah. So you'll notice like with my first pass, I very rarely talk about distinct flavor descriptors. I mostly talk about levels of acidity and levels of sweetness. It's not until the coffee is cooled down a little bit for me that I can like really start to get like distinctive notes. Yeah. So I will usually in my cupping notes, I'll kind of structure it that way where it's fragrance, aroma, and then the first pass, which is level of acidity, level of sweetness, or anything that just like hits me really hard.
Right.
And then in my second pass, that's where I'm getting into the flavor wheel vocabulary, right? Of like what things are tasting like, fruits, vegetables, flowers, perfumes, chocolates, baked goods, baking spices, all of those things. And then with that last pass, that third pass, I try to answer questions about tactile experience and about finish and aftertaste. That's where I'm asking myself, how heavy weighted is it? How long lasting is it? And then overall quality or impression.
Right. Yeah, I'm a little bit reversed.
Do you do it the other way?
I get a lot of like notes up front, and then I think I meet you in the middle, where I kind of like start to look at like the acidity and flavor together. And then I kind of, the overall, like what kind of came out more or less. And, but yeah, flavors hit me like really quick always. I'm always like,
must be nice.
Boom, must be nice.
But we do like to wait. That first pass, we did it at 8:45. So now our timer's at 13 minutes because we do really want to let that coffee kind of cool off quite a bit. That sample roast, I'm getting like straight pink starburst again.
Yeah.
Like now I'm really in that, I don't know what flavor a pink starburst is. Is it raspberry?
Sometimes it's kiwi strawberry. Sometimes it's strawberry banana. Sometimes it's like pink lemonade.
Pink lemonade. Yeah. This is more pink lemonade. It's not banana-y, but it definitely has that like nice, like ripe strawberry. It's very lightweight. I mean, a lot of times with a sample roast, as it cools, you really feel like you couldn't drink a lot of it.
Right.
But this is, because it's a natural process, it's kind of naturally a little bit more syrupy.
Yeah.
It really likes to be at a really light profile.
Really?
And I think that this is, it's kind of reminding me of like a nice, like kind of off dry, like Riesling.
Yeah.
A little bit like sweet, but really you could kind of keep drinking it.
Right. Yeah, I think that pomelo note we talked about earlier is like moving into like that's almost like a red grapefruit now.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of that lingering tannin.
Yeah.
So I think that Riesling is like really nice. Note.
Got to know your wines and your beers.
Wines and beers. This one got like really kind of like butterscotchy. Yeah. Almost.
I was gonna say like it's really jammy. Kind of macerated fruit or candied fruit where it's getting quite a bit sweeter. Butterscotch is a good note because it kind of speaks to like that caramelization that's happening.
Yeah, and that stickiness.
Yeah. The finish for me is kind of medium in length, so I'm getting a little bit of aftertaste, but just a minute, like just a beat, and then it kind of gets very clean again. Maria, that's a great question. You asked about scale for body when cupping. We often in training talk about fat percentages of milk. So very, very lightweight coffees might be skim or non-fat. And then as we get heavier, we might go 2%. Is there 3%?
No.
Or it's just whole milk?
I think it's just whole milk.
1%, 2% whole milk. I don't drink dairy milk, so you can tell. I might say this is almond milk, this is a rice milk.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so we just sort of think about how it sits on your palate. Is it heavy in coating, or is it, I use words like crisp, light, even almost effervescent would be very light. But milk is usually one of those like easy kind of entry points for that conversation.
Yeah, I'll often be like, piggyback on like the milk. I kind of always think about like hot chocolate and like Swiss Miss if it's made with water versus milk.
You do say that a lot.
Yeah, so like that's kind of like my determining like, oh, like thin and like silky body or like big and full and round.
On the spectrum too, over there, like even lighter than skim milk would be tea-like, which is another one that we use a lot. Very watery, but tea-like is not negative. Ooh.
Yeah.
This is like, it reminds me of Capri Sun.
Yes. Totally.
I hope everyone knows what a Capri Sun is. Little juice in a pouch.
So artificial.
It's so artificial, but it's like appley. It's like lemon limey. It's kind of like just like a hodgepodge of a lot of different flavors.
It's like a tropical amalgam.
A cornucopia of corn syrup and artificial flavors.
Citric, malic, tartaric, phosphoric. Yeah, all the acids sitting in a pouch.
This is still, I think we said this on the first pass, maybe about this coffee, but like blackberry, if you're from the Pacific Northwest, kind of like a Marionberry vibe, just really nicely like restrained fruit flavor. Yeah. It's there, but it's not like punching you in the face. It's not as, tropical and kind of like a pina colada, like what we're getting in cup number one. It's, more like if you had, maple syrup that had like been infused with fruit. Yeah. Which feels like, oh, this is fruity, but it doesn't feel like you're just putting fruit on your pancakes. You're still putting maple syrup on your pancakes.
Yeah, kind of like having a crepe with like fresh fruit and maple syrup and brown sugar. Yeah. That's kind of like what I think about. Yeah. Very buttery, but smooth all around. Like I feel it everywhere. Yeah. It's not just like one note and gone. Or it's like creeping up. It's like very like present. Yeah. Yeah.
Medium weight and buttery is a good word for this too, because it feels almost fatty. Like coffee has some vegetable oil in it, right? It has some lipids. And so if we can kind of capture those, we can kind of feel those on the palate and they can feel really, this is a chefy word, but very unctuous. Really nice. Someone asked about scoring acidity on the SCA form. Yeah. Bryant and I don't use the cupping form very much, not unless we're doing like a full evaluation for certain purposes. Mm-hmm. But what's nice about the SCA form and something that I incorporate in my own descriptors is there's two lines for acidity. Right. Intensity and quality. So something can be really high intensity, but very low quality. That's like just eating citric acid, right? Something can be low intensity, but still very high in quality or, somewhere in the middle. So, and of course, on the SCA scale, you've got numbers 0 through 10, but for the specialty coffee scoring sheet, we're really only using 6 through 10 because coffees that score well below 6 are not considered specialty.
Yeah.
So the intensity and the quality is going to combine to give you a scale for that score, which would be somewhere between 6 and 10. And for most of these, I would say like the intensity of acidity maybe varies maybe a point or so.
Yeah, not much.
But the other important thing to remember is that with the SCA cupping sheet, the scoring sheet, we're only really ever using this type of a roast, the sample roast. So when we get into evaluation and comparison of profile roasts, the cupping sheet is not a very good tool for us anymore, because the cupping sheet is really built to evaluate green coffee and evaluate green coffee quality. And now we're kind of getting into like roast quality, which is its own thing.
Right.
We should create a score sheet for it.
Well, and that's kind of like a guide too. In a lot of places, like even my past roastery, like would dissect the SCA cupping sheet for green to kind of fit like how they would cup their own production roasts.
Yeah.
So kind of like a shortcut to being like, it has everything we're looking for. These are the notes that this coffee should be. Cool, nailed it. Ship it. Send it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those tools that you do, if you are going to use it, you have to manipulate it a little bit to suit your needs.
Yeah.
And I think for both of us, we have learned how to use it as a frame of reference.
Yeah.
And now, like, I certainly structure my own cupping notes based on those categories. But you're not going to tell me I have coffee?
I didn't even see it. It just blended in so well, I guess.
But yeah, so that's a little bit about how I think about acidity, and I tend to think about a weight or body kind of in the same way. Like if something is very heavy bodied and still very silky or syrupy or smooth, then that's high quality. Something is really heavy bodied and really gritty or grainy or kind of, super dry, super dry. And that's probably a low quality experience too. You'll notice that with cupping, we are never talking about what we like or don't like. We really try to keep subjective language out of these conversations and out of our notebooks, because it's not about what we like or what our preferences are. It's really just about what the experience is. And if it is, it seems like words like high quality do feel subjective, but if you've been trained and you've calibrated with other cuppers, then you have a reference for what is high quality and what is low quality.
Don't get us wrong, we're only human, so it does slip every now and then.
Sometimes we go, oh, I love this coffee. I'm going to do my last pass. We're at 21 minutes. Ooh, now that sample roast has cooled off a little bit, I always said it. Ooh, it's very limey, like very key lime.
I was about to say that.
Key lime pie. Yeah, it's got that kind of really nice, like high note right at the beginning, and then it sweetens. But it's still very light-bodied, very crisp, very clean, very short finish. If you got this as a brewed coffee at a cafe, or if this was what you were serving, the first few sips would be very, very enjoyable. But then if you're getting lower in the cup, you would kind of go like, oh, it's just not very coffee flavored. And it would certainly not do well with cream or sugar or anything else that you would find at the condiment stand.
Yeah.
It would just get wiped out.
Yeah, you would just be like, that's a nice cup of milk.
Yep. Yep. But on its own, it still has that like nice white wine, that nice kind of like citrus.
Totally. Yeah, I was thinking like it reminds me of like peeling a lemon to get the zest for like a cocktail.
Yeah.
And then like going into it.
Yeah. This is the first time I'm like looking at our notes that we include in the brew box. And with profile 1, we have purple fruit, cocoa, lime candy, and coconut cream. And that coconut cream note is so apt for this coffee because it is, it's tropical and like rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It does have that. I don't know what it is about like coconut milk. It does have that kind of, it's not funk, but it is like
it's like a little muskiness.
Yeah. But it's like a sweet muskiness that is so pleasant.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is like, it just kind of lingers.
Totally.
Or like in that, what is it, the retronasal? Like
Yeah.
It kind of creeps up a little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Woo. Lemon peel, citric, tangerine. I mean, we have all of these flavors here that are on the card. Ripe strawberry, a little cherry, a little vanilla. This is just a really like bright, nice, light coffee. comparing this to the sample roast, which we don't have time and temperature for the sample roast because it's kind of a classic sort of control.
But it's roughly that like 815 to 390 is kind of what we have for that, where it tends to end up.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, exactly. So, this compared to the sample roast compared to profile 2, which is this like light, kind of hot and fast one. This profile 2 would be a coffee that I would be very excited to get served in a cup at a coffee shop. It's still very light, but it has just a lot more nuance, a lot more flavor. Yeah, a
lot of like complexity in there.
Yeah. There's a question about EK43 settings for cupping. In general, cupping grind should be, it's a little bit relative because it's like, as long as you do it consistently, then you're fine. Some people grind very fine for cupping. Some people grind very coarse for cupping. I, like kind of a happy medium.
Yeah.
We do just a slightly more coarse than paper filter. So whatever you use for your batch brewer, if you have like a large volume batch brewer, you might go a little bit coarser for that. We have the older EK that has 10 or 11.
It's 11
digits, and we normally would grind at around an 8, maybe a 7 or an 8 for cupping. So I don't know if that helps because you have a different scale, but whatever you grind for paper filter, maybe a little bit coarser than that.
For sure. Blueberry pancakes is kind of what I get.
Yeah, I keep thinking of that maple syrup note and that, butterscotch and caramel that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
for that last profile. This one has a much longer finish for me too. Like I get a lot of the sweetness, like you said, in that retronasal. So I'm still kind of like smelling sweetness as I'm talking afterwards. For folks, maybe you've noticed, but we always kind of spit out our coffee during a cupping. We do that for a few reasons. Number one, we don't want to get really spracked, overly caffeinated, or start to feel sick. But two, if you swallow, cup number 1, that coffee, you kind of hold some of that flavor in your retronasal cavity, and it kind of, you taste a little bit of it on the next sip as well. So by spitting out, or the SCA term, which is expectorating, you're able to really clear your palate fully and then kind of be prepped for the next one. Yeah. Cool. I love these coffees as much as I did the first time we cupped them.
Yeah, they're so tasty.
Yeah.
And it's also just, I think we cupped 3 of these Manos Juntas slots, I think maybe 5-6 months ago or something.
Yeah. They've held up like beautifully.
Yeah, they're very high quality greens. And they stick around for a very long time. And it's always fun to see. It's always fun to check in on coffees and see how they're doing, and not just roast it and be like, well, we hit the profile.
Yeah.
Got to make sure to taste and make sure it's still tasting the same.
Exactly. Yeah. So I hope you've enjoyed the opportunity to taste these coffees with us. If you've got a brew box at home that you're holding on to, I know some people are doing a group cupping with their families for Christmas.
Yeah, great idea.
Sounds so fun. So if you're watching this recording later, hello, happy holidays. Thank you for enjoying these coffees with us. This is just such a fun way to explore profiles, right? When we're new cuppers, new roasters, and we've got a lot of different stuff on the table, it can feel like really hard to get your bearings.
Yeah.
By eliminating a few variables, in this case, using the same green coffee and roasting it different ways, you can really do a very effective comparison.
Right.
This is not how I would teach brand new cuppers how to taste. I would do really different coffees because this is a little bit more nuanced. I think it's a little more advanced.
Yeah.
But it is a really nice way to think about roasting and thinking about how you can really coax new and different flavors out of the cup based on just profile.
Yeah. And sometimes, this is just what folks need, because when you're roasting for production and to sell coffee, it's like you get stuck in like, well, I don't have time to experiment, or like if I experiment, that's like money lost, and you don't really have that flexibility. But that's what the Brew Box is supposed to be. Those experiments that we can hopefully do ourselves and share.
You can kind of get trapped in this like what if world, right? As a roaster, when you are, you have something that you're fairly confident with and you start selling that, and you're sort of laying awake at night going like, well, is that perfect? Is that the best? And this is kind of an exercise where you can take hopefully a small batch of coffee or, on your sample roaster, and do a couple, use these as templates or as like jumping off points, and roast it pretty hot, pretty slow, something in the middle. Or, what I talk about a lot in class is take your roasted and brewed coffee and start to mix and match in the cup on its own. Where's our dump set? Here we go.
Dump set is right behind me.
Thank you. So I could take, knowing that cup number 4 is kind of a middle of the road from 2 and 3, tasting that as a little reference, I could take kind of a spoonful of 1 or 2 and a spoonful of 3. And it is like remarkably similar to 4. So it kind of is like a way to kind of like look into the future of what else would be possible there for finish temperature.
Now I'm actually drinking this, which is maybe a bad mistake.
Not an exact science, but a fun science, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it kind of?
It is. It is very it does.
Kind of does the same
lend
thing.
Itself.
Yeah.
So fun.
So we've still got Brew Box dates available through the end of the year. If you would like to order one, this will kind of be, this is sort of our winter Brew Box. We're also now available on our website selling our holiday gift box.
Oh, yeah.
Which is roasted coffee in a nice 12-ounce bag. We've got both of our holiday blends, Snowblind and Hibernate. Those have cupping notes on the bags. Those come with a fun surprise bonus gift and would be the perfect thing to put on the holiday altar at your home or give to the coffee lover in your life.
Yeah.
If we get slow enough in that week between Christmas and New Year's, we'll do a live cupping of the holiday blends. Yeah. What do you think about that?
I'd love to do that.
Cool. So stay tuned. Keep following. Let us know what other questions you have about roasting. Give us a call, send us an email, drop us a DM on Instagram, and we'll see you next time. Woo. Thanks for watching. Oh. Bye.
Later. Later, taters.